Good morning, Great New Bethlehem. Pray all is well. Certainly, we thank God for this day, this time, this privilege, and this opportunity. Thanking God for things being as well as they are on this day. How grateful to God we are for the privilege to be here and to share with you once again for our Sunday school. And we're asking that everyone would prepare yourselves as we find ourselves in the Gospel of John, John chapter 11, verse number 17 through 44. Certainly, we thank God for the privilege, and certainly as you're coming on and sharing with our Sunday school time and our Sunday school hour. We're thanking you. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Listen, our lesson today is the word resurrects the dead. The word resurrects the dead. And again, our lesson scripture, lesson focus is John chapter number 11, verse 17 through 44. We have four different outlines, brothers and sisters. And the first outline is found in verse 17 through 20. Jesus is in control. Verse 17 through verse 20. Jesus is in control. Number two, Jesus is always right on time. Verse 21 through 24. Verse number three, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Verse 25 through 27. And then lastly, Jesus is Lord over death. Verse 38 through 44. And certainly we are going to share and see what God has to say to all of us as he continues to give us what we need. And definitely we will see what God has to say that we may be strengthened today. If you would bow with me for a word of prayer. Dear Father, how we love you, how we praise you, how we thank you for this time, this privilege, and this opportunity. Bless us now as only as you can. Keep us, give us strength. Allow your spirit to speak to and through. Saturate each and every setting, each and every individual, that we may be strengthened by your word. How we love you and how we thank you. It's in Jesus' name, for that's the only name that matters. We ask it all. Amen. God bless you and God keep you is our prayer. Again, we are in John chapter 11. The word resurrects the dead. Our focus is that of the Gospel of John is written so that we all would believe. Those of us who are unbelievers would become believers. Those of us who are already believers, that we would keep believing. And sometimes God has to use certain chapters in our lives to make sure we believe. In this familiar passage in pericope of John chapter 11, we know of the lifting and the raising of Lazarus. And God had to use and utilize a brokenness, a broken time for Mary and Martha, and even those who were surrounding, to become witnesses or to become believers or be better at believing. And certainly that has what has happened. The Lord was there trying to actually, he received word that Lazarus was sick. And it was a 2-day journey there, but he stayed 2 extra days. And what he shares is that when it seems like it's too late, God is still able, the Lord is still able to do what we cannot do. And so if you don't mind, we're at the place of Bethany, a place of misery, where God has mercy on them. And so in our first outline in verse 17 through 20, Jesus is in control. It reads as thus: Then when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. Now Bethany was nigh unto Jerusalem, about 15 furlongs off. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary, comfort them concerning their brother. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary was still in the house. Notice what the text says. It says in verse number 17, when Jesus came, he found that he had lain in the grave 4 days already. In other words, here's the idea that not only was Lazarus dead, Lazarus by this time was stinking. Lazarus by this time was stinking. And the idea was that it was a 2-day journey. And yet it seemed like Jesus delayed himself deliberately. There's some things that we've been praying about for so many days, so many weeks, so many months, and so many years. And it seems as if that it's not unheard, but it's almost as if the Lord is at a halt, where he has deliberately delayed himself. But I want to remind you that your delay does not mean your denial. That even though sometimes he causes us to wait, we must build up our faith to see how the Lord will fix it. Bethany, it was nigh, it was close to Jerusalem. But notice what he says in verse 19. And many of the Jews came to Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Notice what he does. While Christ is on the way, there are people in Martha and Mary's crushing that they are finding themselves comforting them. They're making comfort to them. And so they're comforting them in their crushing moments. But in the midst of it, here's what happens in verse 20. Then Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him, but Mary sat still in the house. Here's the idea that sometimes when it seems like things are out of our control, it does not mean that it's not in the Lord's control. Maybe that's what you need to hear today, and be reminded that things may be out of your control. This virus is out of control. The violence is out of control. The inflation and the depression seems out of control. Everything that is going on seems out of control. But no matter what's out of our control, thank God that the Lord is still in control. He's in so much control that he doesn't have to rush to where we are. He can take his time, but we have to just trust him in his timing. We have to just trust him in the fact that he's able to turn things around. But notice, when Martha hears about the arrival of Jesus and his coming, she goes and gets up to meet him right where he is. She does not wait until he gets to the house. She gets up from the house and goes meets him. Notice they are at a house of misery. They're in Bethany, but Jesus, the master, is approaching. But yet while Martha is up running to him, Martha is not only sitting in the house, but the text says that she's still. Look at what happens in this second outline. Not only do we see that Jesus is in control in verse 17 through 20, but also we see Jesus is always right on time. Look at what it says in verse number 21. Then said Martha unto Jesus, Lord, if thou hast been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou shalt ask or wilt ask of God, God will give thee. Notice what she says, brothers and sisters. Martha comes out to meet Jesus right where he is before he can come to her house where misery is to give them mercy. She comes to meet him. And notice, watch this. When you can't find him, the question is, can he find you? Look at what he says. Martha said unto him, Lord, if you would have been here, if you would have been present in the midst of this problem, if you would have showed up in this midst of the situation, if you would have been here in the midst of my hurt and hardship, watch this. She says and suggests that God, the Lord's presence is able to prevent Lazarus from dying. That's what she's suggesting. And what she says is that I know you weren't there. I understand that he died. I get that. But this is what I know. In spite of the fact that he's gone, in spite of the dilemma, in spite of the distress, in spite of the difficulty, here's the reality that I know. I know that even now, in spite of what's going on, even now, in spite of what happened 4 days ago, I understand that now that whatever you ask of God, God will give it to you. In spite of the problem, in spite of the pain, she says, Martha says, in spite of her frustration, she has faith that no matter what Jesus prays for, God will provide it. Thou will ask. It means whatever you desire, whatever you crave, whatever you call for. It is to imply that our hope or her hope that Jesus would and she would pray for an immediate resurrection in spite of the decomposing of Lazarus' body. In other words, when things are falling apart, she has faith that God will still answer prayer. So she continues on in verse 23 and 24. And she says, Jesus said unto her, thy brother shall rise again. Martha says unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at that last day. Watch this, watch this, watch this. Here's the second I know that Martha deals with. Martha says that if you would have been here, no doubt my brother wouldn't have died, okay? Your presence knows how to prevent some things from happening, all right? But she says, in spite of that, I know that if you pray, God will answer prayer. Jesus responds and says, your brother will rise again. I know it's falling apart. I know what happened 4 days ago. I know the death and the decomposing of his body. I know the facts says that there's no way that things can turn around. I know the reality of everything, Jesus says. But in spite of the reality, he says that Lazarus will rise again. That word rise again literally means to stand up. And maybe that may be a word for you today. That in spite of what's weighing you down, you will stand up again. In spite of financial issues, you can stand up again. In spite of the physical dilemmas. You can stand up again in spite of what emotional and mentally may or spiritually may be weighing you down. You can stand up again. Now watch this. He says, thy brother, your brother will rise again. But notice what Martha says in response in verse 24. Martha said unto him, I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Watch this. She says, I know, in verse number 22, where she says, I know if you ask God for anything, if you pray, the Lord will answer prayer. But she says, now I know that he's going to rise again on that last day of the resurrection. This suggests, brothers and sisters, that no matter what Martha is facing and feeling, she has faith that this ain't final. I'll say that again. No matter what Martha may be facing and feeling at the moment, she has faith that this is not final. This ain't over yet. Jesus says he will stand up again. And Martha says, I ain't got no doubt in my mind that he will stand up again. But when he stands up again, that is during the resurrection on that last day. In other words, it's not here yet, but it's on the way. Notice what happens in this lesson. The word resurrects the dead. We see in the first outline that Jesus is in control in verse 17 through 20. But then in verse 21 through 24, we see that Jesus is always right on time. But then thirdly, in verse 25 and 27 through 27 rather, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Look at it if you don't mind. Verse 25 of John chapter 11, Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Here's the question. Believest thou this? Look at it. Look at it. All and many of the Jews historically believed in the resurrection or in the final resurrection, in the dead, where Jesus is coming back again. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. This is suggesting that in spite of what she knows, it's not about what she knows, it's about who she knows. She stated that she knows that on that last day, the Lord, Lazarus will rise again. Okay? But now she's suggesting, or in response, Jesus is suggesting that while you're talking about this subject of resurrection, understand that I am the resurrection, but I'm not just the resurrection, I am the life. It suggests, brothers and sisters, that resurrection is not just an event, but resurrection may be an individual. She says that I'm going to see him on that last day when God shall resurrect everybody. Jesus says, that's good. That's what you know. But what I need you to know is who you're talking to. I'm the one that's going to give him up. I'm the one that is the resurrection. I'm the one that is the life. Now, here's the focus. Here's the emphasis. It's not just who, but more so belief. Watch what he says. He that believeth in me, that word believe, he that trust in me, have faith in me, have confidence in me. though he were dead, whether it be physical or spiritual, yet shall he live. Although he were dead at one point in time, he shall have life. Now, he's dealing with a physical situation, but it refers also figuratively to a spiritual situation. We are born without Jesus, we are dead in our sins. But when Jesus, or when we believe in Jesus Christ, we are yet living in him. He says, whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. This is dealing with the ultimate death, the final death. That if you live in him, in other words, life is in Jesus. But in order for you to have life in Jesus, you have to believe in Jesus. But notice what he says, it is all inclusive, because he suggests and says, whosoever, which suggests that no matter who you are, where you are, what you are, you have the opportunity to believe in him and have life in him. But you have to believe, you have to trust, you have to have faith, you have to have confidence in. Now, here's the rhetorical question that he asks in verse 26. Do you believe this? That may be the question. Do you believe? Notice he's not asking Martha if she believes this while the bright sunshine is out. Jesus is asking Martha, does she believe while she is broken? And maybe that's the question. Do you still believe? Not when things are well, but when everything is going wrong. Do you still believe? Verse 27 says, she said unto him, yea, Lord, I believe that thou art the Christ, the Son of God, which should come into the world. Notice what she says. She makes a profession and confession of her faith. The Lord asks a question, do you believe? And she says, I believe. Although I'm broken, I believe. Although I'm battered, I believe. Although I'm burdened, I believe. Although I'm bruised, I believe. I have faith. I accept. I am persuaded. I have confidence. I believe. Yes, what do you believe, Martha? I believe, Lord, that you are the Christ. Maybe this is the basics of our belief. We must believe that Jesus is Christ. He is King, in other words. He is Messiah. But then, not only do I believe that you are the Christ, I believe that you are the Son of God. That your Father sent you here. And then I believe that you were the one to come into the world. Doesn't this go all the way back to John 3:16? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. I believe. Let us conclude. Lastly, number 4, Jesus is Lord over death, verse 38 through 44. Notice what he says. Jesus, therefore, again groaning in himself, cometh to the grave. It was a cave, and a stone laid upon it. Jesus said, take ye away the stone. Martha, the sister of him that was dead, saith unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he have been dead 4 days. Verse 44, or 40 rather, I'm sorry. Jesus said unto her, said I not unto thee that if thou wouldest believe, thou shalt see the glory of God. Notice in verse 41, then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that thou hast heard me. And I knew that thou hearest me always, because of the people which I stand by, I said it, that they may believe that thou hast sent me. Let's park here for a second. Notice what happens in verse 38. Jesus, therefore, again, groans in himself, cometh to the grave. Jesus finds himself groaning. Jesus finds himself feeling some type of way. Jesus feels himself hurting like Martha and Mary. It is after Mary shows up and she weeps at the graveside of Lazarus. And the shortest verse, I believe in verse 36, says, and Jesus wept. It suggests and says to all of us that whatever we feel in life, Jesus knows how we feel. That there is no emotion that Jesus has not experienced himself. In other words, Jesus understands just how you feel. He wept. He cried at the graveside of Lazarus. But he groans at the grave, but while he's there, he gives instruction to take away the stone. But notice what Martha does. Martha allows the facts to interrupt her faith. Listen to what Martha says. Martha says, in verse 39, the sister of him that was dead said unto him, Lord, by this time he stinketh, for he hath been dead 4 days. Understand, brothers and sisters, that Jewish burial happens immediately when they die. And it's almost as if, brothers and sisters, that in the midst of the facts where she says, there's no point in trying to bring Lazarus up. He stinks. It's become a stinky situation. That's the fact of the matter, that the situation stinks. But here is what Jesus says in verse 40. Jesus says unto her, said I not unto you, I already said this to you, that if you would believe, thou shalt see the glory of God. Now, watch this. It is at the graveside where she sees the facts and smells the facts. He's dead. It's all over. Jesus responds to her facts and reminds her to have faith. He says, I want to show you something, but in order for you to see it, I need you to have faith to believe. That may be a word for somebody. The Lord wants to show us his glory, but in order for us to see it, it is up to us to keep believing forward. Notice what happens in verse 41. And then they took away the stone from the place where the dead was laid. And Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank thee, for thou heardest me, for I know that thou hearest me, because of the people which I stand by, I say it, and they that may believe. Watch this. The first I know in verse 22 of Martha was that she said, Lord,
if you pray, I know that the Lord will answer your prayer. So here it is. At the point of her pain, Jesus prays right in front of her. While she's worried about the facts, Jesus looks to increase her faith. He removes the stone that's blocking. And notice what he does. He begins to pray. He begins to do what she knows that the Lord is able to do. He begins to pray, and this is what he prays. He prays with his eyes lifted up to the Father, showing dependence to on the Father. And he begins to thank the Lord that God still hears him. He says, I know you hear me because of the people that I'm around, so that they can see and also believe. Again, she's becoming feeble in her faith because of the facts, because of what she sees and because of what she smells. But the Lord deals with what she knows. Praise and thanks God that we serve a God who hears us even when we're hurting. And he does it so that somebody that is around us can believe. And what he does in verse 33, he says, and when he thus have spoken, he cried out with a loud voice and called his name Lazarus. He says, Lazarus, come forth. Verse 44, and then we're done. He says, and he that was dead came forth and bound the hand and foot with his grave clothes, and his face was bound about with a napkin. Jesus said unto them, loose him and let him go. Watch this, brothers and sisters. Jesus does several things, at least three things. He lifts Lazarus. Understand and remember, Lazarus' name means one whom God helps. And it seems as if in life, the Lord has halted his help for you. But the Lord, you have to understand, he hears, and he may not come when you want him, but he's always on time. He lifts Lazarus by calling his name. Thank God that we serve a Jesus who knows our name right where we are. He lifts us, and not only does he lift us, but he sees what is binding or bounding us. It was the grave clothes that Lazarus had on. And what Jesus tells the grave clothes is to loose him. Here's the idea. The Lord can bring you out of something, but you still can be bound from where he brought you out of. And so what Jesus does is lift him, but then loose him. But after he looses him, he lets him go. And thanks be unto God that when he lets Lazarus go, he becomes, brothers and sisters, a living testimony of what the Lord is able to do, to the point that in the very next chapter, people scatter and come to see Lazarus, because the last time they see Lazarus, Lazarus was dead. But the next time they see Lazarus in the next chapter, Lazarus is living. Thanks be unto God that we have a Jesus that can change our circumstance. He can change our conditions from lifting us, loosening us, and letting us go. God bless you and God keep you. The word helps and speaks to our dead situations. May the Lord bless you and may the Lord keep you. Let us prepare for worship at 10:45. We will be back on YouTube and on Facebook. Read Psalm 103, verse 1 through 5. I want to talk to you from the idea and thought. Don't forget. May the Lord be with you. God bless you. See you at 10:45.